It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now. I'll tell you what, folks. This is going to be one heck of a humdinger of a day. For those of you that aren't aware, and I've already gotten quite a few calls because I posted this up this morning on our website, the Supreme Court of the United States has refused to hear the Hodges case, which means that the National Defense Authorization Act and the indefinite detention of Americans can continue as planned if you are a belligerent or a troublemaker. We're going to cover that topic in our third segment because I want to make sure that we have enough time to address the entire thing. But I've got to tell you, it's not good. This is a very, very bad turn of events. And, the other day I posted up a meme on our site, which basically, and I talked yesterday about the Supreme Court and the issues surrounding it. And, I posted up a meme that says you can count on 9 to strip you of 10. The Republic is dead. And, folks, I meant it. What you don't realize, for those of you that aren't paying attention or watching these types of issues, the Bill of Rights is dead. You have no more rights under the Bill of Rights or under the Constitution. The National Defense Authorization Act enables the federal government to lawfully take you from your home, from your place of business, whatever, indefinitely detain you based on their definition of a belligerent act. All you have to be is a troublemaker. These aren't my words, folks. These are words of individuals that filed amicus briefs, which are friend of the court briefs. This is from PANDA, the people against the NDAA. I got to tell you, this is not good news. We're going to talk about it extensively. In our first segment, we're also going to talk about this issue with Benghazi and the new emails that suggest that not only was the White House involved, but they prepped Rice for the video explanation and with full knowledge. And, to make matters worse, the guy who made that decision is the brother of the head of NBC News. I'm sorry, CBS News, excuse me. The guy, Ben Rhodes, who wrote the memo, is the brother of David Rhodes, the president of CBS. Folks, look, I've been telling you for years that we live in a police state. You just haven't been notified officially. And I'm making it official. I don't know what more you want. I've been telling you this and telling you this and telling you this. I've already gotten a bunch of phone calls this morning. I see my email lighting up like it's a Christmas tree. What more proof do you want? The evidence is everywhere. Mountainous. You're standing on a plane. You're looking around you in a 360-degree circle. You see mountains that are unscalable. Every one of them twice the size of Everest. You're completely encircled. Yesterday it was announced that, our second segment, yesterday it was announced that Ed Markey and Hakeem Jeffries, they want to pass a piece of legislation that enables the federal government to monitor television, radio, and print media for hate speech and extend that to include your phone calls and everything else. Talk about a backdoor methodology of approving and expanding the NSA's surveillance mission. Folks, what part of police state don't you get? The rule of law no longer applies to you at all. The rule of law applies only to those who are politically, corporately connected. That's it. End of discussion, end of the day. The Republic is over. And I'm telling you right now, mark my words and mark this date, 4/30/2014. You will see Americans snatched up off the NDAA and held in indefinite detention. It's going to take a while before we figure it out, and I'll tell you why. They can't even call you and say, I've been picked up. Come help me. They can't get a lawyer to say, please file a motion on my behalf with the court, because they're not allowed to have a lawyer. They're not allowed access to the courts. They don't have to tell you as a family member. Hello? What part of gulag system don't you get? This would be the same hate speech that Ed Markey is trying to shut down. Right? Because I'm exposing the truth. And that's all these guys care about, is keeping that under wraps. Even the Huffington Post came out against this. All right. Our third segment is going to be the police state. SCOTUS greenlights the coming purge. And I mean it is going to be a purge in the traditional, in the abusive government, in the totalitarianistic, authoritarian, fascist format. That's what I'm telling you right now. You can say I'm crazy, and that's fine. I want you to take this down and download this segment, and then I want you to store it in your phone. And then when the news starts coming out that Americans are disappearing, okay, then you can pull it back out and listen to it. Our fourth segment, EPA's fake science is commissioned to deliver a specific agenda that advances their position on global warming, climate change, and the total domination of all property rights in the United States. That's what that's really all about, ladies and gentlemen. It has nothing to do with turtles. It has nothing to do with fish. It has nothing to do with water, air. It has everything to do with the EPA having access and rights over your property, your business. That's what it's about. You can stand here and try to rationalize that which makes no sense. I'm telling you right now, I've been saying this, and I say it every day. The evidence is everywhere, mountainous. Everybody's waiting for the big notice. Notice from whom? From what? Were you expecting Fox News to come out and declare the Republic is dead? Is that what you need? You need MSLSD to come out and say, we have assumed control. We have assumed control. Is that what you need? Resistance is futile. I mean, what more proof do you want? It's everywhere around you. Let's get into this first segment. I'm so frustrated because I am so tired of people saying to me, yeah, I see it coming, but I don't know what to do. I see it coming, but it's not here yet. It is here yet. It's already here. And the building blocks are in place. And they're moving new blocks in place every single moment. Not every day, every moment of every day. What do you think all of this nonsense about biometrics and facial recognition is all about? What do you think all of this stuff about immigration is about, eliminating the border? What do you think all of this stuff is about, empowering these banks? The Federal Reserve running completely amok and wild, generating trillions of dollars worth of debt that they manufacture out of thin air. Don't you realize that these people who are running the government, they know that this is impossible to pay off. They'll never pay it off. It's $17.7 trillion that they know they cannot pay off. And out of that, the Federal Reserve holds some $6.5 trillion of it. They have no way to pay it off. They don't even have it. It was never generated. It was just numbers in a computer algorithm. Zeros added. They can't pay this debt off. And they know they can't. Why do you think Congress is sitting there completely abdicating any responsibility to do the right things for you? Because they know that the time is here. The day is over. The war has been lost. And now they're just making sure, like the Nazis were before the war ended and all hope was lost and it became obvious to everyone, those few who saw in advance what was going on were looting the treasury and looting the art and getting out while they could. What do you think is going on, people? Is this something new to you? How can it be? Cheryl Atkinson has a brand new piece out today about how the White House has directed the Benghazi narrative. This is, for the record, and I've been saying this all along, this Benghazi thing wasn't about anything else other than a gun-running operation. That's what this was. It's a cover-up for treason. I'm going to say it clearly, and I'm going to say it once. This is a cover-up for treason. They allowed Al-Qaeda, a known and sworn enemy of the United States of America, the enemy that committed an atrocity that killed 3,000 Americans. They knew it. They allowed them to get weapons that were not intended for them. They allowed it with a wink and a nod. They cooperated, they assisted, they aided, and they abetted an enemy of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, go look up the definition of the word treason and tell me this does not fit. And the guy, all of this time, they keep saying, no, it wasn't about that. We can't identify who was the person who changed the talking points. You see, you're all lost in the minutia. It has nothing to do with minutia. This was obtained by a Freedom of Information Act by Judicial Watch. I mean, thank God for them, because there's not a single damned one of these journalistic organizations that will do what Judicial Watch does on donations. These multi-billion-dollar mega corporations, the corporatocracy of the Ministry of Propaganda, 6 of them out there, not a single one of them could turn up what Judicial Watch did by a Freedom of Information Act on donations from listeners and readers of their blogs. You've got to be kidding me. Talk about David lifting the city while Goliath pants and falls to the ground weak. What a shame. What an indictment. What an indictment against the so-called journalists of the mass media. Where have they been? This information has been available all along. Why couldn't they get it? With all their money, all their connections, all their pry bars and all the doors, all their feet stuck in all the door jams, they couldn't get it. No, they didn't want to get it. That's the problem. You want to know why? Because David Rhodes, the president of CBS, why didn't they publish it? Why wouldn't they let Cheryl Atkinson talk about it? Why did they silence her? I'm going to tell you why. David Rhodes, the president of CBS, is the brother of Ben Rhodes, the White House, the guy in the White House who wrote the policy. Hello? Talk about a conflict of interest. America, you're just sitting around because you're afraid to recognize what has to be done. You're afraid to acknowledge it and take the action that's necessary. I get it. Nobody wants to be the first one to fall. Nobody wants to be the first one to step forward. Our republic is lost to us. That's the theme of today's program. The republic is lost. The republic is dead. Long live the republic. With a K at the end. Republic, as in banana. And this is just more proof of it. Everywhere you look, the evidence is directly right in front of your face. You know, even patriots, people who strongly believe that there's something desperately wrong with the nation, don't know what to do. We saw the opening step of it over at the Bundy Ranch thing. And then as disorganized and as uncoordinated as it was, it worked. And then the media, when they found their first chink in the armor, they didn't just put a knife in. They injected poison through the chink. All these people out there talking about all this stuff, everybody's got their foot in their mouth because they can't wait for their 15 seconds of camera fame. I mean, what the hell? Is Stuart Rhodes out there talking about drones or some nonsense, telling the Oath Keepers to pull out? You got Mac out there opening his mouth talking about women and children in the front. I mean, I don't care whether his comments were taken out of context. He knows better. Rhodes knows better. Those guys have plenty of public speaking experience. They should have kept their mouths shut or watched what they said. Bundy, he's just a guy who's enamored and inflamed with his own 15 seconds of fame. Talks too much, doesn't have the eloquence and the articulation to be able to get out there and say what needs to be said the right way without opening his mouth and inserting his foot. And these liberal media organizations, the Ministry of Propaganda, have got bear traps laid around the guy 9 deep in a 360-degree circle. And he was dumb enough to step in, not once, but then instead of pulling his foot back, he tried to run through, and he kept stepping in trap after trap after trap. The truth of the matter is, America, what we thought we had as a nation is lost to us. And it's lost to us because we have been too greedy and lazy to take it back. And that's the simple truth. We've been too greedy because we're afraid to give up that which we have. We're afraid to step up and pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Who amongst you is willing to die and put your life on the line? Who amongst you is willing to lose your fortune and put it on the line? Who among you is willing to stand up and defend her, your, and our sacred honor? This indictment isn't of them, it's of us. It's of you. It's of me. The smoking gun is here on Benghazi. Proof of the White House's participation in an act of treason. What will be done about it? Nothing. Nothing. I'm telling you right now, you'll see nothing come out of this. You'll see a little bit of news blip about it, and that's it. It'll disappear off the timeline. An open act of treason. Congress is unwilling to expose it because they're participatory. Their hands were in the cookie jar along with the administration. The Republicans don't want you to know because many of them had knowledge, guilty knowledge, that this was going to happen or happened or was working in the works. They knew it. That's why there's no real effort. Don't you see? You're asking the chief of police to investigate his own police force for taking bribes, when at the end of the day, what it turns out is that the chief of police is getting a cut. What do you think he's going to find? The Republicans, the Democrats, all of them have knowledge, not only of Benghazi, this Federal Reserve nonsense, the issues of the EPA, the police state, the rise of DHS as the new dominating KGB. What do you think these people are operating in complete ignorance up there? You think they have no idea what's really happening? Come on, give them some credit for that. They're far more in the know than anything you'll ever understand. And all of them are biding their time. Either they've been promised a seat at the table of the table which would be tyranny that rises from the ashes, like a phoenix from the ashes of liberty, or they've been coerced into it. But don't tell me they don't know. Don't tell me they're not participatory in it. They are. Don't tell me that 9 justices in black robes who sit on the Supreme Court don't know what the meaning of this is. You heard Scalia. I gave you the quote. He said at the University of Hawaii not so long ago, you'd be a fool to think this won't happen again. What do you think he was doing? He was telegraphing to you exactly what this SCOTUS decision is about. Ladies and gentlemen, to find out more about this particular story, since I can't get to it, because the truth is, I am just so disgusted. You can go to the websites and you can find it, because I've linked it up there, and I'll have it at the bottom of this YouTube video. So in the comment section, or the description section, you can find the links to these articles. Do your due diligence. You should be spreading this virally. I don't care if you're hand carrying it around on a thumb drive to people. You should be giving these radio programs to every person that you come in contact with. I don't care if you spend your life savings and buy CDs and hand them out in front of a Walmart or on 4th and Main at everybody who stops at the light. This is the news that you will never hear. And there's a reason you won't hear it. You think that hate speech, the timing of that hate speech legislation was a mistake? Come on. America, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Goodness gracious, countrymen. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can communicate with me directly to Mike at americasvoicenow.org. That's Mike at americasvoicenow.org. I've been standing here doing this for 3 years, screaming into the wilderness. Nobody listens. All right, we're back. America, I'm flabbergasted that all this is happening right in front of our very eyes, and everyone has got their head under the covers like a scared child. You know that noise you were afraid of underneath your bed when you were a kid? There really was a boogeyman. Just a different form than you thought. You know, this segment is about the hate speech law and how it's fascism defined. But I can define fascism by pointing to any one of 100 things I've spoken about in the last month alone. I mean, the IRS targeting Americans over their political ideas. Is that not fascism? I mean, how else would you define that? Lois Lerner came out yesterday and said, through her attorney, because she doesn't dare come and speak in front of the panel directly herself, a final plea. Holding her in contempt would be un-American. Really? Un-American? Wasn't it un-American, Lois, for you to, with malice and knowledge and malice of forethought, to actively go after people because it suited a political agenda, an ideological agenda? You didn't care whether those people were hurt financially. You didn't care whether or not they were hurt and placed in prisons. You didn't care whether or not it injured their own hopes and dreams and aspirations and desires. You didn't care about any of that. You cared about meeting some political goal you had, imposing your viewpoint of the world on the rest of us at the point of a gun. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't get less un-American than that. You can't get less un-American than Bernie Sanders, Vermont, independent he calls himself. He's a avowed socialist. And he came out the other day, and he said, in my view, no single financial institution should be so large that its failure would cause catastrophic risk to millions of American jobs or to a nation's economic well-being. No single financial institution should have holdings so extensive that its failure could send the world economy into crisis. And perhaps most importantly, no institution in America should be above the law. He just defined and drew you a handwritten, a custom graphic of the Federal Reserve. $7 trillion balance sheet they have no hope of repaying. Is that not so large that its failure would cause catastrophic risk to millions of American jobs or the nation's economic well-being? Is that not a single financial institution whose holdings are so extensive that its failure could send the world economy into crisis? Is that not an institution in America that is above the law? You want treason? You want police state? You want examples? I can show them to you all day long. You have a country whose leadership bows to foreign powers that are our sworn enemy. You have them acting in open, blatant treason, selling arms to a sworn, known enemy, aiding and abetting. I mean, go look up the definition of treason. Seeking to overthrow your government or aiding and abetting a known enemy. What do you think Al-Qaeda is? Is that not the target of the war on terror? Barack Obama's administration, and you can bet with Barack Obama's direct assistance, knowledge, and direction, allowed Al-Qaeda to obtain weapons. How else do you define aiding and abetting? I mean, aiding and abetting a known fugitive, right? Let's assume for argument's sake that you helped someone who you knew was a fugitive. For whatever reason they're running, kidnapping, murder, bank robbery, makes no difference. There's a level of culpability that goes along with that. You give them food because they're hungry. That's one level of guilt. You give them the keys to your vehicle. That's a different level of guilt. You help them by giving them money so that they can escape away. You've added another layer of guilt. But they lost their guns in the shootout with the cops, and so now you open up your gun safe and you add to that, you give them weapons, making them dangerous to the general public at large. Because they're going on a spree, because they don't really care anymore, they know the jig is up, they're on a rampage. Is that not a completely different level of culpability? You got Ed Markey, this piece of trash, Democrat out of Massachusetts, and Hakeem Jeffries. And they've submitted a bill that radio... I mean, is this not designed to shut down something like this? Even the Huffington Post came out and said, it's a terrible idea. And the Huffington Post would be the last organization I would expect to say that. But they did. Inside Radio has an article out there. And, they're trying to tie this to that white supremacist guy who, murdered those the Jewish people. He's a KKK member or whatever. I mean, so they're going to take one example of one guy who runs amok, and they're going to institute this draconian surveillance monitoring system on radio and television and the free press, and insert government monitors and everything. Ladies and gentlemen, that is no different than the USSR, Soviet Russia. The United Soviet Socialist Republic. Remember? With a K at the end? Yeah, that one. The one where you could just be picked up off the street and thrown in a gulag in some prison up in the bitter cold 50 degree below zero prison systems they had. The archipelago. Have you not read the stories of the archipelago of gulags that were held up in northern Russia? Have you not read Solzhenitsyn? The Gulag Archipelago. Go read it. It's our future. It's our future rewritten 70 years later, 60 years later. Solzhenitsyn lived it. They want to monitor what can be said on the radio under the rubric of hate speech. First of all, who's going to define what qualifies as hate speech? You mean the same people who are going to define belligerent act? Those same people, you mean? Yeah. The same people who wrote a piece of legislation that says you can be held in indefinite detention for a belligerent act. You're going to trust them to write what's determined and defined as hate speech? You got to be kidding me. The NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, under this legislative piece of crap, it's called the Hate Crime Reporting Act of 2014. And they would be given vast new powers. Isn't that surprising? To report and identify hate crime. The Hate Crime Reporting Act of 2014. And they would be assisted by the Department of Justice, the Commission, and the United States Commission on Civil Rights. You're kidding me. It says here that they would analyze information on the use of telecommunications, including the internet. So that means, oh, wait a minute, it's not just limited to radio now. It's not just limited to newsprint. It's not just limited to television. Now, it's including the internet. So it's every website, it's every email, it's every voice over IP phone call that gets made. Suddenly, you realize how vast the definition is for the word internet. Why do you think it was left vague like this? I'm going to tell you why. Because ultimately, the claim would be everything moves through the internet pipes, so therefore everything is wide open to us to identify where hate speech is going on. You had a phone call with your sister, and one of you used the N-word. Suddenly, you're going to get a rap on your door by the hate speech police, including the internet. This is their words, not mine. I'm reading right off the bill, ladies and gentlemen. Hate crime legislation bill. To analyze information on the use of telecommunications. That's your phone calls. Your phone calls. Your texts. So when you see these black guys who text each other A-N, with the A at the end, will that be construed as hate speech or no, because they're both black? So who's going to define that? Analyze information on the use of telecommunications, including the internet, broadcast television, radio, cable television, public access television, commercial mobile services, that's your cell phone, and other electronic media. That's everything. There's nothing else left. And it covers anything that might come out in the future. Twitter, all of that nonsense. To advocate and encourage violent acts in the commission of crimes of hate, as described in the Hate Crime Statistics Act. You see, ladies and gentlemen, just the submission of this piece of legislation is an act of treason. It's a clear violation of your First Amendment right to free speech. It's a clear violation of your right to think as you choose, no matter how abhorrent your thoughts may be to society. You have the right to think and speak anyway. Look, the old adage, you can't cry fire in a theater. That's where your free speech stops. But you know what? Shut up, punk. Look, ladies and gentlemen, the proof is everywhere around you. This was an act of treason. Ed Markey and Hakeem, whatever the heck his name is, should be removed from the Senate. They should be forced to resign by their given states, first and foremost. They should be forced to resign. That's it. New York and Massachusetts ought to be up in arms. They ought to be going after these two with tar and feathers and handcuffs. Now, I guarantee you that under this bill, that would be construed as hate speech. Say again? You don't think so? Let me show you why you're wrong. The IRS just yanked the tax-exempt status of the Patrick Henry Center for saying a lot less. Don't you get it? Even the Huffington Post is dripping with sarcasm. Government should stay as far away from broadcast content as possible, they say. And who will define hate speech? Hate speech can be anything you disagree with. It can be speech directed at a person who is offended. There is no asterisk in the Constitution that says, quote, except for hate speech, end quote. Oh, and how are they going to analyze media outlets? Using what metric? It says, tying their bill to this week's alleged white supremacist shooting in Kansas, Markey says, quote, it is critical to ensure the internet, television, and radio are not encouraging hate crimes or hate speech. He brushes aside expected First Amendment arguments, saying criminal and hateful activity aren't covered by the Constitution. Since when? And who the hell is Ed Markey to make that determination for the rest of us? He's one out of 315 million. Talk about the tail wagging the dog. First of all, find me anything that establishes that this white supremacist shooting in Kansas had anything to do with the internet or radio or television or print or any other media. It's not, you see, It's all a chimera. You ever look across a really dry creek bed or a lake and you see that thing in the where the mirage that you get from heat? That's called a chimera. It's a false vision. Huffington Post goes on to say, well, the Constitution isn't something to brush aside. Thank God for them saying that. And no matter how many heinous crimes are committed by deplorable white supremacists, it's inane to make the case that it's because of something someone said on the radio. It takes more than a ranting talk show host to instill the kind of hate in someone that spurs this kind of depraved behavior. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if that's not a ray of rationality, I don't know what more you're expecting to see. And here's what's even worse. The legislation doesn't propose specific penalties, but instead, what they would do is collect information and report the findings to these congressional oversight committees. Now, let me explain something to you. These findings would be reported, and where would they be held and stored and used? Well, they would be incorporated and added into the hate speaker's personal profile. This is the same one held by the NSA, the IRS, the DHS, and every other federal agency out there that's including all your purchases and the Consumer Safety Board, the new one that they created that is now collecting information on every credit card and ATM swipe purchase you make. Every bank account record you have, every dollar that goes in and dollar that comes out, they're monitoring and tracking. They're storing it all and putting it in a file. In a hard drive that the NSA has built just for you. They say, by their own admission, and this is going back a year and a half ago, that they can store everything about you and your life. All of your phone calls, all your internet searches, anything and everything about you. All the email that you send, all the stuff that you write, all the stuff that you submit, all the stuff you buy and sell. Every tax record on you, every one of your health records. They can store it all for $300 per citizen. Do the math, ladies and gentlemen. $300 per citizen times 300 million Americans is what? A couple of $1 billion. That was the rounding error on the Senate's lunch bill. They can store your entire life for $300 measly. The article goes on to say, just what we need. A law that creates committees but has no enforcement power on something the government shouldn't be enforcing in the first place. That will sure stop the white supremacists. And I agree. I mean, how ridiculous. Who put Ed Markey in charge of your speech? Who put Hakeem Jeffries? You can bet Hakeem would be one of the first ones to be out there screaming bloody murder about, well, based on his first name alone, I don't know the guy, but based on his first name alone, I bet one of the first things that happens is you're not allowed to mention the word Islam in any way, or Muslim in any way, shape, or form that doesn't have a smile attached to it. And the canard that it's a religion of peace. So, is this the workings and the rantings of two individual crackpots up there? No. There are 29 co-sponsors. 29. And by the way, since the Federal Communications Commission is the one who actually tracks and monitors all of the radio stations that are out there, and all the broadcast television, and all the cable, and all the media. And they just announced the other day their net neutrality program, which was really a rehash of an older program that was really intended to do what? Silence those that they don't like. How many more clicks do you need to hear before you look down and recognize that the handcuffs are on so tight that they've cut off the circulation? I mean, it's just absurd to me. The entire country is standing around acting as if, it's all going to get better. They're going to get over this like it's the flu. And in 3 or 4 days, everybody's going to feel better and we'll all be back to normal. Don't you get it? This is the new normal. It's not the flu. It's a terminal illness. And there's no recovery. This isn't something you're gonna there's a way to be healed from. This is a mental illness that has no known cure, no known cause, and makes the individual who is the victim of it homicidal and suicidal, politically speaking. They're homicidal to you while cutting their own throat. What will the next administration do? If there is even a next administration. Ladies and gentlemen, at the pace we're racing towards the finish line here, I mean, we're not going to make 2016. Look around you. Look at how things have changed in the last 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 60 months. Who'd have thunk 7 years ago we'd be having this conversation? Never in a million years, you'd say. Well, that's been shortened, apparently, by 999,997 years. This is not a function of the rule of law. This is the rule of tyrants. It's not even the rule of men. It's the rule of tyrants. Tyranny has come to our shores. It is living among us. It looks like us. It dresses like us. It walks like us. It talks like us. It is a demon in disguise. And while you are walking around with your blinders on, pretending that it's all going to get better and somebody's going to come up with a magic pill that's going to solve the problem, the nation is burning down. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the third topic, the police state. The police state. I'm calling it what it is, and you should be too. SCOTUS has just green-lighted a coming purge. And I mean that in its most literal sense. The Republic is dead. Long live the Republic. With a K. I'm exactly who they want to shut off. That's what this is all about. Silencing critics, silencing educators, silencing people who are willing to speak out despite the danger. They can't afford. Look, the pretense. Oh my gosh. All right. You can write to me about this or any other topic we do. Mike at americasvoicenow.org. We'll be back in just a minute.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right, America, we're back. And it ain't a good morning. I'm not going to mislead you. You're catching us in episode or segment 3 of our program today. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the police state and my declaration that the Republic is dead. Long live the Republic. The Supreme Court of the United States has green-lighted what is sure to be a coming purge. It's not me saying that. These are the people who were instrumental in the case. The Supreme Court has refused to hear. They have denied cert. I don't want to get into the details of how the Supreme Court hears cases, but everybody submits their cases, and the Supreme Court either gives them certiorari and certifies that case to move forward and be heard, or they deny it. They denied it in this case. This is the Chris Hodges case. This is the case about the National Defense Authorization Act and the ability to detain a threat to national security of anyone viewed as a troublemaker. Anyone who commits a belligerent act. That's their word, not mine. Define what exactly might a belligerent act consist of. What is that? What is a belligerent act? Is it your refusal to stand down when you're told to by an officer at a protest? Is it your speaking out in a blog or a radio program that you do? What is your belligerent act? Is your belligerent act refusing to sign up for Obamacare? What exactly constitutes a belligerent act? We don't know. And guess what? We're never going to know. You know why we're never going to know? Because the people who are accused of the belligerent act are barred from access to an attorney or the court system. They don't have to, the federal government doesn't even have to notify your family you've been snatched and where you're held, or that you're even held. So how are you ever going to get in front of a court to say, Your Honor, you can't hold me until you define what a belligerent act is? Because you never even get to ask the question. You want to talk about a circular reference mathematical equation? There you go, ladies and gentlemen. It has no beginning and it has no end. And your Republicans in Congress passed this. They're the ones who wrote it. They're the ones who passed it. And they reaffirmed it over and over and over and over and over. You know why? Because they're traitors. It's an act of treason. And they know it. That's why legislation doesn't get passed to help you, because their job is to subjugate you. They've already made the commitment. They've sold their souls to the devil, and there's no backing out of the contract. They signed it in blood. The High Court issued the order this week on Monday that they refused and returned the review. This is an appellate-level decision that says that the president and the U.S. military can arrest and indefinitely detain individuals, any individual, American, non-American, makes no difference. If that doesn't scare the pants off of you, if you don't need to go change your drawers right now, perhaps you need to rewind and listen again. Any individual can be held for the act of belligerence. I don't know about you, but I generally construe the word belligerence to have a very, very low threshold of activity. I mean, when you talk about an act of violence or an act of belligerence, the difference between those two thresholds is miles apart. officials with the William J. Olson's law firm that filed an amicus brief. That's a friend of the court. That's what that means. And an amicus brief means that they file this brief and say, we're not a defendant and we're not a plaintiff in the case, but we have an active interest and we believe that we have something to say that the court should take into consideration. That's what an amicus brief is, right? Asking the court to step in. They filed an amicus brief asking the court to step in. Please certify this to hear it because it's important. Noted that not a single justice dissented in the denial of certiorari. Now, that means that 9 out of 9 sold you out. 9 out of 9. It's a unanimous decision to allow the federal government to commit acts of treason. Hello? Quote, the court ducked. Ducked. I call it far more than that. The court ducked, having no appetite to confront both political parties in order to protect the citizens from military detention, said the legal team. Quote, the government has won, creating a tragic moment for the people and what will someday be viewed as an embarrassment for the court. Really? So, let me just remind you. Let me find it here so I can give you the exact quote. So I want to remind you of, where the heck is it? Come on. I'm trying to find this quote. Here it is. Antonin Scalia. So let me remind you of what he said, and this is in Salon, one of the most liberal organizations out there. Anton Scalia says Japanese internment could happen again. Now, this was, I did a whole show about this, a whole segment about this. This is back in February 4th of this year, right? A month and a half ago. I told you at that time he was questioned by a student at this University of Hawaii. And he was questioned by the student in reference to the Pearl Harbor, after the Pearl Harbor attack when Japanese Americans were interned. And here's what he had to say. Well, of course Karamatsu was wrong, meaning the decision by the Supreme Court. Karamatsu versus United States was the name of the case. Well, of course Karamatsu was wrong, said Scalia. And I think we have repudiated it in a later case. Here it comes. And I want you to listen to this with extreme care. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. I'm going to say that for you again. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. This is a man who parses words for a living. This is a man who understands the implications of every word that he says, that are weighed word by word by word, like you would study a passage from your Savior out of the Bible. This is a man who understands that the word will is an imperative. That the word may or can has a completely different context and changes the entire tone and tenor of a statement. And he didn't say, but you're kidding yourself if you think the same thing might not happen again. That's not what he said. He said, but you're kidding yourself if you say that if you think the same thing will not happen again. In other words, it will, and I'm telling you it will. And I'm telling you what he was telling you then was that this is a telegraph of the punch to come. And the punch is right now. The government has won, says the law firm of William Olson. creating a tragic moment for the people, and what will someday be viewed as an embarrassment for the court. And then I hearken you back. Again, I want you to hear Scalia's response. Well, of course Karamazov was wrong, he says. He's acknowledging the mistakes of 1944. I've forgotten what Karamazov was. It wasn't 44. It was like 41, I think. 42. 43, excuse me, because it was after Pearl Harbor. So it would have been 43. Well, of course Karamazov was wrong. And I think we have repudiated it in a later case. In other words, repudiated, we rejected our own mistake in a later case. We corrected the mistake. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing, the same mistake, will not happen again. That same mistake is happening right now. It's just been approved and verified by them. They've green-lighted your government to create a Gulag archipelago. The controversial provision authorizes the military under presidential authority to arrest, kidnap, detain without trial, and to hold indefinitely American citizens thought to, quote, represent an enduring security threat to the United States. Based on what? Who defines what that threat is? How do they define, is it enduring? How do they define you as a security threat? You'll never know. And the reason you'll never know is because you're never going to get in front of a judge. You're never even going to get an attorney who says, I can't file for you because they won't allow your case. You're not even going to get as far as picking up the phone to say, are you an attorney? I could really use your help. Because that call will never be made. Do you understand that? Do you understand the implication of that? You can't file the brief. No attorney can file the brief on your behalf. And even if the brief were to be filed, the court would reject it. Ladies and gentlemen, the circle has been closed. Dan Johnson, the PANDA National Director, which is the People Against National Defense Authorization Act, right? People Against the NDAA. In 1944, he says the Supreme Court approved the preemptive detention of over 110,000 Japanese Americans. So it was 44. There's your date for Karamazov. The court's denial 70 years later proves that we cannot rely on 9 people in black robes to defend our freedom. It is now up to the states, cities, counties, and the people of this nation to show the Supreme Court that it is not the final arbiter of our human rights. As 5 cities have already done so, I urge Americans across the country to begin action to ban these sections in their communities, raise awareness, and push back against this denial. If Washington, D.C. thinks this is the last they will hear from us, they are very, very wrong. One of the plaintiffs, the lead plaintiffs in the case, it wasn't just Hodges, it was a whole group of plaintiffs. And by the way, most of them are journalists. They're journalists who are saying, this is silencing our free speech because we could go over there and do an interview with some Al-Qaeda, ringleader, and the next thing you know, when we come back in and we fly back in and we land in Dallas or in L.A. airport, we get picked up for aiding and abetting a terrorist. That's our belligerent act. Tangerine Boland writes, quote, we are no longer a nation ruled by laws. We are a nation ruled by men who have so steeped themselves in a false narrative that at the same time they are exponentially increasing the ranks of terrorists. They are destroying the rule of law itself. It is madness upon madness. The classic tale of becoming the evil you purport to fight while believing you remain righteous. I couldn't have said it better. In Panda's article, they go on to finalize their final comment. If the outcome of this lawsuit does not cement the fact that the courts will not defend the Constitution nor our rights, then there is little more evidence to be presented. The federal tier has failed us. The states, localities, and eventually the people are where we will stand. As we resist, the work of the plaintiffs will not be forgotten. So let me quantify something for you, because I want you to hear the statement of, where the heck was it? Well, let me just read it to you because I read it to you yesterday, and if it hasn't sunk in, I want you to hear it again. You seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions. A very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would put us under the despotism of an oligarchy. The Constitution has erected no such single tribunal. Thomas Jefferson, 1820. Ladies and gentlemen, what more do you need to see to know that the Supreme Court of the United States is acting in open, blatant, undisguised treason? 9 justices unanimously refused to hear this case. That's exactly what it is. Meanwhile, they're going to hear a case about sneakers, and they're going to hear another case about some civil lawsuit, and they're going to hear a case about some guy who got caught with drugs and whether or not, they should have been allowed to peek in his underwear with a spy scope. You know what? It's minutia. While everyone's ignoring the elephant in the room, they're stomping on the ants. Jefferson also went on to say, much earlier than that earlier quote I just read you, cherish, therefore, the spirit of our people, and keep alive their attention. Their attention to what? The Republic itself, and the preservation thereof. Cherish, therefore, the spirit of our people, and keep alive their attention. Do not be too severe upon their errors, but reclaim them by enlightening them. For if once they become inattentive to public affairs, you and I, and Congress, and assemblies, meaning states, judges, and governors shall all become wolves. Ladies and gentlemen, the wolves are just wearing clothing made of wool. Now, under the National Defense Authorization Act, which incorporates these vague terms like substantial support, direct support for Al-Qaeda or an enemy, a declared enemy. Well, wait a second. Stop right there. I bring you back to Benghazi then. Substantial support, would that not include weapons, money? Direct support, would that not include funneling weapons through Libya to Al-Qaeda? I rest my case. And a belligerent act. And if one falls under any of these terms, you are subjected to indefinite military detention without charge or trial. Why should that matter to you? Well, because the implications of this are world-changing. The controversial provision authorizes the military under presidential authority to arrest, kidnap, detain, without trial, and or hold indefinitely American citizens thought to, quote, represent an enduring security threat to the United States. Another friend of the court brief that was submitted in the case. Many law firms and interested parties submitted amicus briefs. Quote, the central question now before this court is whether the federal judiciary will stand idly by while Congress and the President establish the legal framework for the establishment of a police state and the subjugation of the American citizenry through the threat of indefinite military arrest and detention, without the right to counsel, the right to confront one's accuser, or the right to a trial. These are learned people who wrote these court briefs. These are not, this isn't Mike who's just saying this stuff. This was in a brief that went before the Supreme Court that they read and then rejected. Now you tell me that that has no bearing on the nation. You see, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. The Republic is dead. Long live the Banana Republic. The NDAA was fast-tracked through Congress in 2012. It was reaffirmed in 2013. And the 2014 NDAA was fast-tracked through Congress, too. And it added even more layers, essentially making sure that not only could you be picked up and held indefinitely, but that there were organizations that were establishing a framework to legitimize what the NSA has been doing to us all along by creating these massive databases. And the reason they did that was as a preemptory measure in case Congress actually got some backbone or public pressure was so great that they had to stop the NSA. Then they could say, okay, we have to stop doing it publicly through the NSA, but now we can do it through the NDAA, and we can still accomplish the same goal. 85 of 100 senators voted in favor of the newest version of the NDAA. 85 out of 100. 85 out of 100. Did you hear what I just said? And the House of Representatives? No sweat. Just pass it. I know nothing. In Section 1021 of the 2012 NDAA and its successors, in other words, the other NDAA approvals after that, which, by the way, for the record, the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. It's what authorizes the monetary spending to pay the soldiers and buy the tanks and the missiles and the bullets and the blah, 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 blah. Why are they passing activities like this under that? Ladies and gentlemen, SCOTUS has green-lighted the coming purge. The Republic is dead. Long live the Republic. Mark my words. You save this segment, and you pull it back up when the truth comes to bite you. All right, you've been listening to America's Voice now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the EPA's commissioned fake science that it is paying for like a commissioned piece of artwork to accomplish its agenda, to arrive at a predestined, biased solution or answer or equation that establishes what they want it to say. You see, when you do it that way, it carries no credibility because you're now looking at the world through the lens of the artist who was commissioned to do the work. There's no peer review. We'll be right back. America. This is our final segment. Thank goodness, because I'm not sure I could take too much more of me this morning myself. It's amazing. It is amazing. So far, we've talked about Benghazi and the email that ties the White House to a clear and open and blatant act of treason, that of aiding and abetting a sworn and known enemy of the nation. That would be Al-Qaeda, aided and abetted by the White House, the Pentagon, and Congress, and the State Department, and directly herself, Hillary Clinton, as they sold and transferred weapons to a sworn known enemy called Al-Qaeda. That's the real cover-up, folks. In our second segment, we talked about the hate speech law that is fascism defined. And in our segment that just passed, we talked about the police state and how SCOTUS has green-lighted the indefinite detention of Americans and has set the stage for the coming purge, the putsch that will come. The Republic is dead. Long live the Banana Republic. In this segment, we're going to look at the EPA chief, Gina McCarthy, and how she is rejecting claims that their science is commissioned. They call it secret science, and it is. The EPA administrator, she is claiming that it's an unfair statement that the agency is relying on, quote, secret science. That was the phrase used in one of the hearings that she was involved in, to impose regulations on air and water pollution. She should be charged and held right now and convicted of perjury and thrown in prison for that statement, because it is secret science. One, there's no peer review. Two, they won't even release it to the public. So how can there be a peer review if there's no release to the public? If there's no release to the scientific community? In fact, they won't release the secret science to Congress. Hello? We have this science that proves this, and we're passing rules and regulations based upon that. Okay, can we see the science? No. But we're Congress. We're the ones who have to approve of what you're doing. It makes no difference. You can't see the science. You just have to trust us. Okay, can we have other scientists take a look at it? Because we know we're just a bunch of buffoons in white suits up here. So we realize that we're not scientists at heart, and we probably wouldn't understand all that complicated thinking. So why don't we just have some other scientists peer review it? No. Well, how are we supposed to make a determination if we're Congress and we have to approve what you're trying to do, Ms. EPA? It doesn't make any difference. You're just going to have to trust us. Really? You mean to tell me you're going to move another 1/6 of America's economy based on the secret science, the secret squirrel science nobody's allowed to see, no peer is allowed to review, based on Gina McCarthy's promise that it's legitimate? Gina McCarthy, the one who can't tell the difference between a neuron and a moron? She says that science is the EPA's North Star. She goes on to say, if the EPA is being accused of secret science because we rely on real scientists to conduct research and independent scientists to peer review it, and scientists who have spent a lifetime studying the science to reproduce it, then so be it. However, that's not true. What is true is that the primary author of the United Nations IPCC, which is their global climate change body that is studying global climate change, global warming, climate change, you can call it whatever acronym you want, but basically it's all the same thing. And he just came out yesterday and said that the summary that all of these governments, including our government and the EPA and the Department of State and all these other agencies are relying upon, was manipulated by politicians themselves, not for accuracy, but to meet their agenda. This is the main author. And he's a Harvard guy. He's not, some right-wing kook. He's a left-wing kook. David Schweikert from Arizona introduced legislation a couple of months ago. And that legislation is designed to prohibit the agency from proposing or finalizing any rules regarding Clean Water and Clean Air Act. This is the one where the EPA is trying to take over personal property, private property, without first disclosing all of the, quote, scientific and technical information, end quote, that they are relying on as the source of their rationalizing and reason, right? The Secret Science Reform Act, which is what he's called this, was proposed in response to the EPA approving regulations, quote, that would have placed a crippling financial burden on economic growth in the country with no public evidence to justify their actions, right? Well, I already did a whole segment on this secret science crap once before. And there is absolutely no denying the fact that McCarthy and her crew, sponsored, brokered, promoted by this administration, are not willing to expose or put forth any of this information for a peer review. They won't. They won't even release it. McCarthy says the secret science argument is a worn-out argument. Well, guess what? We heard the same thing from President Barack Obama when he said there's not even a smidgen of evidence that the IRS did something wrong. And yet you got Lois Lerner out there with emails that prove otherwise. There's no terrorist involvement here at all in Benghazi. This was all about a film. In fact, I wonder why when I watch the mainstream media and the press, who everybody keeps throwing these timelines out, and they say, well, a week after, what's-her-face was still out there talking on the talk shows, and hey, guess what? 2 weeks after, the president himself went and stood in front of the United Nations, in front of God and all man on the planet, and he made the statement that it was not a terrorist attack. So everything up until that point is moot. And since he knew well before the 2 weeks was up, McCarthy goes on to say, these critics are playing a dangerous game by discrediting the sound science our families and our businesses depend on every day. You can't just claim the science isn't real when it doesn't align well with your political or financial interests. Now, the truth is, Senator David Vitter from Louisiana comes out and says, EPA's leadership is willfully ignoring the big picture and defending the EPA's practices of using science that is, in fact, secret due to the refusal of the agency to share the underlying data with Congress and with the American public. You see, it doesn't really matter what the EPA says they have, because they won't let anybody see it. Now, I don't care whether you want to, quantify that as secret science or whether you want to quantify that as uncooperative or how you want to quantify that. I'm telling you right now that any time a government agency is going to modify our economy and take away personal and private property rights and have absolute dictatorial control over the lives and the businesses of Americans across the nation, you better have more than some scientific reports that you refuse to actually allow us to see. Or are we going to fall for the Obamacare debacle again? I posted something on AVN this morning that is a report that came back that said that under the current regulatory regime that we are living under right now, I want you to understand something. And this is very important stuff. The United States right now, the cost of implementing all of the regulations from every one of these extra constitutional agencies that has no authority to exist under the Constitution at all, and is actually acting in open, blatant treason against the best interests of the nation and America all collectively together, is the equivalent cost of the 10th largest economy on the planet Earth. What? Yes. The cost of implementing the regulations of these tyrannical monsters, these Frankenstein freaks, is equivalent to the 10th largest economy on the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you've got to be kidding me. You see, what this really is a willful and intentional. They're drawing and they're sucking the resources out of the country. The goal of this is to strip America of its ability to defend itself, first peacefully in the courts, and secondly with guns and bullets when it comes to that. That's what it's about. So just get it through your head. Acknowledge it. You're a dead man walking. You're a dead woman walking. They've already planned your demise. The only difference is you just don't know when the bullet's coming your way. And mark my words, I don't mean in some kind of an illusory manner. I mean literally. If you speak out, if you are one that is unwilling to stand and play ball their way, mark my words, they've got a mark for you. So the regulatory tax, according to this article, and it's from investors.com, I mean, this is not some, quack outfit, tops $1.86 trillion. Just for the record, by the way, Canada's entire GDP is only $1.8 trillion. So our regulatory burden alone exceeds the entire GDP of Canada. There are 200 and some odd countries on the planet. 200 and I think it's 210. I mean, it changes from time to time. Let's just call it 200. So, essentially, if there are 200 countries and our regulatory burden is equal to the 10th largest economy in the world, that means that there are 190 countries that have gross domestic product earnings less than just our regulatory burden alone. Just the penalties we pay to keep these pieces of trash in a job. Let me tell you something, folks. It ain't about clean water and it ain't about clean air. That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with power. It has everything to do with the ability for them to strip you of the resources so that you are helpless, blind, naked, and afraid. That's what this is about. Make them scared. Leave them stripped. Leave them pummeled and bruised. And they will capitulate. And they're doing that. They're doing that with the EPA. They're doing it with the IRS. They're doing it with the FCC. They're doing it with the USDA. They're doing it with the FTC, the FDA. They're doing it with the SEC. They're doing it with the ATF. Don't you smell it? Don't you see it? This isn't just where there's smoke, there might be fire. You're standing here, the house is fully inflamed, fully engulfed, and you're standing in the living room. And you're standing there with a cup of water trying to pretend that if I spill this over my head, it'll save me. I'm sorry, but it won't. We have reached the breaking point. We have reached the tipping point. The America you knew, that you loved, that you thought you understood, that you believed in, is no longer here. The truth is, we're now some third world dictatorship. And we're wearing the scraps of our royal robes and pretending that they're really not scraps. They're not rags. We are in denial as a nation, as individuals, that we have lost our republic. We are in denial. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the worst form of treason because it is self-treason. Because nothing that you have and nothing that you can generate, nothing that you can keep, nothing you own, none of it is worth it. None of it is lasting, and all of it will be lost anyway. See, it's already lost. They're just letting you hold it for a while. Here's the only saving grace that we have going forward. You know, like, how many of you have been through the 12-step program because you've had an addiction in your life of some form or another? And maybe you haven't, but, and I've not, but the 12-step program has a couple of basic foundational principles that you have to understand in order to move down the plan. There's 12 steps, but you have to go through steps 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in that order. And essentially, the first step is that first and foremost, you have to acknowledge that you have a problem. And without that acknowledgement, none of the rest of it makes any sense. None of it has any bearing on anything. First and foremost, you must acknowledge that your life is out of control, personally. And in this case, the first and foremost thing that we have to do is admit that our nation has been lost to us, and we are no longer in control. We need to stop fooling ourselves, feeding ourselves fantasy. And then we need to make the determination that nothing that we have, nothing we can possess, not even our very lives themselves, are worth holding on to if the end result, if the end cost, if the end game is our enslavement. Forget our children. Forget our grandchildren. I will not live in that world. I will not live in chains. I will not live under the tyrannical demands and threats of people who I cannot respect. I know to be traitors. I know to have no moral fiber, no backbone, no integrity, no honor, no courage. And if that's not enough for you, then you can bring your kids into it. And your grandkids into it. And the grandkids that you'll never know. Because I'm telling you that when this republic falls, it will go on for ages. How many generations will live under that tyranny? I don't know. Look at the Soviet Union. 1917 is when they kicked it off. It lasted until 1990s. 70 some odd years? How many generations grew up? And how many generations will it take, even from 1990s when the Soviet Union imploded, if you want to call it that? And it didn't really, by the way. I mean, all it did was take on a different form. It put on a different coat and called itself something different. But it's the same dagnab Soviet Union it always was. Jinping from China, same crap. Oh, we're the new China. Bunk. You're the same communist dictatorship you've always been. And all we're doing is joining the ranks of tyranny. We're no longer fighting it. We've taken up the adage, if you can't beat them, join them. How many generations will it take for Americans to say, we've had enough? and our forefathers, our ancestors, didn't have the courage, the fortitude to stand up. Here's the saving grace. James Madison said this to us in 1787. Here's what he said. America, united with a handful of troops, or without a single soldier, exhibits a more forbidding posture to foreign ambition than America disunited with 100,000 veterans ready for combat. Let's hear that again and think about it. America, united with a handful of troops, a handful of Americans who have made the pledge to put my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor on the line to preserve and defend that which I have, that which I plan to give on as my legacy, as my hereditary choice, as my torch of liberty to pass on to those who come after. I owe that for my benefits. I owe that. That's the price. That's the price that I have to pay for all that I have had. And if you welch on that bet, America, if you welch on that bet, America, there's a special place on the other side for you. America united with a handful of troops, read patriots, or without a single soldier, exhibits a more forbidding posture to foreign ambition. Washington, D.C. is a foreign enemy right now. Than America disunited with 100,000 veterans ready for combat. So drop your racial arguments. Drop your arguments about gay, straight, purple hair, green hair, Hispanic, white, black. Put aside your religious differences and stop telling me, well, that church over there says we can't drink wine. Shut up, punk! Realize the greater problem is you're about to die. And that guy sitting over there in that church is your brother. You better adopt the military mentality that says, out here, we're all brothers. And shut off the indoctrination box. You can sit there and you can keep playing these games, these division games, and you can be an America disunited. Or you can become an America united with a handful of loyal Americans without a single soldier amongst us. And we can exhibit a more forbidding posture to the foreign enemy of America, Washington, D.C., and your state capital, I might add. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. They are not excluded from the tyranny. Or we can be disunited. And we can lose our nation. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. Time to wake up and have a serious conversation with your mirror.